That never doesn't scare me, that whole recording pop-up. When I know it's coming.
Everybody, I can see everyone's starting to trickle in here. Just going to give it another 30 seconds or so before we kick things off officially. And they are joining fast, hot and heavy. Let's go. Friday morning.
I like your branding. I like that. I'm partial to the whole black. I use black for my kind of colors, and like everything seems to pop on it. I don't know, something about it.
Thank
It's in the
you.
marketing, as like someone who didn't take marketing and didn't really know much about marketing. The whole attention to detail and color code. I'm like, you learn a lot being part of a marketing team and creatives, and it's kind of interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Good morning from Cincinnati. All right. So maybe we can just kick things off. I see a bunch of people have joined. So hello everybody. It's Friday, April the 5th. We're just over 10 a.m. Eastern time, and we're live for another episode of the State of Social Listening 2024. I'm your host, Tan Sukera, and it's a privilege to be joining you all today. I can see that there's a lot of people that are joining us here, just trickling in here. So, hey, guys, drop a message in the chat. Let us know where you're joining in from, what the weather's like. It's a little snowy where I am. Yeah, I would love to hear that. And we can officially kick things off. So, for those who don't know, I'm the CEO and co-founder of PR, a media intelligence company based in New York, that's focused on helping marketing, public relations, communications, and social media professionals do a better job of reporting into the C-suite. Interestingly, we've conducted surveys with over 1,000 professionals in the space, and 70% of them said that the hardest part of their job is actually proving the value of their efforts. So we work in analysis with all different types of data to help to solve that problem. Data, which is kind of like the stuff that you find in media monitoring and social listening, but also marketing, advertising, business CRM, sales and financial performance, and you can visit www.pr.co for more details. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we kick things off here. This is really all about interaction and participation. So there's a lot of formal and one-way webinars out there, and this is not one of them. So please get involved if you're here and use the chat. And also if there are any technical problems like a drop in connection, please remain on the call. Also, if there's any unanswered questions, let's take them offline, one-on-one after the call is over. Quick shout out to our sponsor partners who helped to spread the word on this initiative. Shout out to you guys. You're awesome. Chief among them is the team from PR on the Go. They've been really, really helpful. Melanie Martin and your team. Hashtag We Lead Comms, Mike Klein. Shout out to Philippe Boremans and Wag the Dog, absolute legend. And one more legend is Faye Shapiro and ComPro. So thank you guys very much for this. Today, I'm joined by, as you can see, an esteemed panel of distinguished professionals. It's my pleasure. I like to refer to them as captains of industry. And now we can go ahead and give them an opportunity to say hello before we jump into the first question. So, kicking off with Jory. Hey, Jory.
Hey, Tan. Thank you so much for having me today. And hi, everyone on the call. My name is Joy McLeod, and I'm the Social Intelligence and Operations Lead at Uber.
Awesome. Next, we've got Chris Chen. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how are you doing? Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. I am the head of global social intelligence within the corporate strategy team at Warner Brothers Discovery. And it's great to meet everyone.
Next, we've got Danny.
Hi, everyone. Danny Gardner. I'm the social intelligence lead at Haleon. We're the CPG that makes Advil, Sensodyne toothpaste, Tums, Robitussin, and a bunch of other over-the-counter medicines. And it's great to be here.
And last but not least, we've got Ellen.
Hi, Tan. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm the global head of social intelligence and listening here at Cash App.
Awesome. So with that, we're going to just go ahead and jump into the deep end, starting with you, Chris. We talk a lot about crisis and the nature of crisis. Every organization is different. Industries are different. what's your take on that? And tell us if enlighten the team a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in media, we have a wide variety of crises. So, um, we have events, and we don't know if how people are going to react to it, or if connection problems are an issue. Zoom is, generally okay, but when we have live events and things happen, or somebody says something, we want to make sure we're monitoring that and making sure that we preempt and or cover anything that needs to be addressed. Additionally, we are working with talent. Talent are people. People will say certain things, have certain beliefs that may be in contrary to general opinions online. Those are things that we want to keep an eye on, making sure that how are people reacting to it, and is this something that we do need to address? Is this something that we just need to monitor, or is this something we completely ignore? Those are all various options that with social we are actually keeping tabs on, and just helping the PR teams and corporate communications teams gauge whether an incident is something that we need to be concerned with. Of course, there's also like fan movements. If decisions are made on the corporate level that may not make certain fans very happy, we are there to keep an eye on it to make sure whether or not, first, is the outrage really concentrated on a small group, or is this a wider audience? Is this something that it's the same group of people, or spam bots that are constantly saying the same things? Or are we actually looking at a general movement where we need to actually keep an eye on?
I definitely agree with everything Chris said, and I think that one point I want to call out for us at Uber too that's really important is defining crisis. So as Chris mentioned, there's all different levels of what you would say a crisis is, and trying to figure out what the comms or PR reaction from that will be, or if there will be one at all. So I think something that we're working on definitely is just identifying the different levels of crisis, whether it's something, an incident revolving one of our earners, or with, as Chris mentioned, talent, or, a new product release. There's so many different levels of what we internally see as a crisis, and defining those so that we have the appropriate response in the future is really important for us.
Yeah, we kind of went through the same thing, and in that, and Joy brings up a good point. As I was trying to draw a line to like, how do we define like when to get involved, and like actions and inactions are still actions, so like it's pretty difficult too. And I remember like our most recent thing was, well, there was a few things, but I'll skip back to maybe the third most recent thing was something that was really kind of caught in the mainstream media, which is around the ingredient phenylphrine, which is in cough medicine and kind of nasal decongestants. The categories we compete in, we make Flonase, Theraflu, and Robitussin, who are affected by this. And part of what our concern was is that because this is hitting the mainstream press, it's going to linger, right? And I'm like, we've been through, I feel like, a lot of these different kind of like micro events or like micro spikes. It's like, yeah, could it turn into something bigger? Sure, but I'm usually pretty confident because I've been through enough of these. It's like, okay, I know this isn't going to be a big deal. We're going into a weekend and it's going to completely tail off. That's the end of the news cycle. In this case, it wasn't. It was more pronounced. It lingered. It went on for a couple of weeks, and so that was kind of helpful for me because I'm like, I don't really know what the benchmark is. You look to some of your historical data, but it's like, most recently for Advil, when our kind of volumes coming back down from like 10,000 to, on a daily average, where we're typically averaging, 300, 400 mentions a day. So that's kind of been like very insightful, really just in the last few months, is to Jory's point, like, how do you know when to get involved? And like, that was the one time I feel like recently where I was like, we need to get involved, and this is a big deal, and I am concerned, and this could reach kind of larger kind of heights and, amplified network effect. And it's a very real threat to our companies. And so I very much relate, even though being completely different businesses than you guys.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Chris and
Completely
Joy.
relate to everything you guys are going through.
Sorry. Sorry, did I
You can go ahead.
call you off? I'm so sorry, Danny. I think maybe internet.
No, go ahead. I was waiting for you.
No, I totally agree with you, Danny, and then Jory and Chris, all the above. I think for me, that in the line of business, like totally like you guys were saying, is not only you look at what can you react to it, and I think there's another pillar is being proactive as well. Is if your PR or corp comes already expecting something is gonna happen, how do you also prepare to kind of, especially from a social conversation perspective, and then you look at in terms of threshold, and kind of Danny, go back to you were saying, is that how much is something that we can now escalate, and how that escalation path look like, and then what your plan is going to be. And so I think for me, that when we look at a lot of conversation recently, that there was a lot of controversies that around the brand, and how do we take proper, how do I say this, like a good appropriate behavior, saying this is what our PR should jump in based on, the threshold, also based on the narrative, and also based on a lot of reaction from the fan. And then we decided that this is when or if we want to respond at all. And I definitely agree, one of the chat, that they say responding is not always help. That's definitely true, that there's a lot of times we just flag, monitor, observe, and that's often happened a lot.
I like that this is a more data-driven like business application. Like I think traditionally, like PR has always been rooted in still data, but more in expertise and in comms and really kind of the soft skills that make the PR profession so important. But now it's like, we were constantly going to us, because I think the impression that like our marketing team, kind of larger company, gets is that like every kind of bad thing we see, we think is much larger than it is. And 90% of the time, I tell people, I'm like, this is going to completely be, water under the bridge, and it is. And the 10% of the time it's not. We usually have a pretty good idea of when it isn't. But we didn't always think that way, and we didn't always use this data the way we did, and not as much, and we didn't have as much insight, so I couldn't make as good a recommendation. But now I feel like this year that's completely kind of changed. And that's just one of so many different ways we use this data, but
Yeah,
it's kind of
absolutely.
enlightening hearing it from you guys too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that social has become the instantaneous way people can react to something and give their feelings. You know, if you're offended, if you love it, if you hate it, all those things, people can give feedback immediately to us, and we do have to keep an eye on whether or not this is something that's real, or is this something that's just an instantaneous feedback, and it goes no further. One thing that we also do quite often is actually, Ellen was saying something about this as well. How we're also looking at not just ourselves when it comes to PR problem and issues. We're actually looking at the overall industry in general. So, just an example, I'm going to go the opposite. So like when we, for example, launched Max, so we cut HBO Max and changed it to just Max. Our good friends over at Peacocks noticed that conversations were, making fun of the name change and everything, and they put out very, very quickly a post that was almost as big as our announcements for the new platform release, saying that they are not going to be reducing their name from Peacock down to a shorter name. And it was hilarious, and it was ridiculously successful. One of the most successful posts for their platform ever, actually. So, yeah, I was, and on the opposite end, we're keeping an eye on when NBC makes hiring things, and then subsequent firing of contributors to their news programs. We're making sure that we are learning from what other people are actually encountering when it comes to their own PR issues, so that we can make sure that we can possibly step around that, or jump on it and be like, okay, well, this is something that is actually relevant to people, and this is how we can further engage. Share of wallet and all.
Yeah, that's funny, and I always enjoy hearing your guys' stories. And it's the same kind of thing, I think through the lens of like the competition, especially when there's more like, competitor to competitor engagement these days. I think that all kind of lives on through community management. We don't deal with that as much on our side of the house, especially because our social strategies are still a little bit younger. And we don't have the reach and visibility, even though we have great brands, and they've been around for 40 plus years. They don't have the same equity online as they do offline. So we don't always get to spar back and forth with some of our competitors. Although I have noticed Kenvue, who is our competitor, they were the spinoff from J&J, just like we were the spinoff from GSK in the pharma world. And they're doing a ton of great stuff on LinkedIn. And like it's very, very clear they have like an actual social media manager behind it. And whether it's the form, or whether it's the copy itself, or just like they're getting great engagement on it. I'm like, I'm not surprised, and it's like it's one of those things where you're constantly watching your competition because they're trying to do the same things that you're trying to do. You don't have to necessarily copy people. And I think that's where we've kind of gotten mixed up the last couple of years. Like, how do we really want to use competitive insights? And it's easy to say like we want them. It's harder to figure out what to actually do with them and where to apply them because you only get so much time in the day. And I love doing the whole competitor insights listening piece, but sometimes it doesn't make sense for us to do it. But in the case of like Kenvue and their corporate brand, they are doing some cool things, and that's not lost to me. And they probably don't even realize that I'm watching that. But and like that's the sneaky like nature of social media. But that's what makes it fun. I mean, that's a brand new application. I wasn't tracking stuff on LinkedIn, and like I know a lot of people in social listening want LinkedIn data, but I've said many times for our company, like LinkedIn wouldn't be very helpful for us. We get a little bit of data. We only do a little bit of advertising on the platform, but for other companies, it's a huge deal. And I completely understand it. And yeah, if I was in those shoes, I'd probably want it really bad too. But anyway, it's interesting too, just where you find inspiration and like, oh, we weren't doing this the last 5 years. Let's start doing it now. So interesting, just building off of Chris's point for competitive listening, where to play, when to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good larger conversation.
I think there's also another theme, which is like evergreen, operationalizing insights, right? Jory, maybe I can point it over to you here. Like, what's your take on it? How do you tackle this beast on a day-to-day at Uber?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's definitely something very relevant to us. I specifically work on the organic global social team. So the other members of my team are the amazing content creators, creating everything going up on our social channels. I am not as heavily involved in that. I'm not as creative. I love the numbers, but it's really exciting to be part of the creative process through social intelligence data. And we have, on our end, dashboards set up that really help to inform one, ideation of what kind of trends and content are working really well organically on social, and then two, show performance of what is working well for us versus not, so that we can continue with the creative strategy. But we have found so much amazing user-generated content via social listening and different evergreen trends that are happening online, and the little niche corners of the internet that can only really be found from social intelligence. And I personally, it's one of my favorite parts of my job is finding a really great piece of UGC that we can, positively show the brand, positively show our earners or our customers, and get it onto our platforms. And that's a really close way that I work with the different strategists on our team. And it really just helps prove the value of social intelligence as well.
Yeah, and I think to your brand, Jory, just because like I'm sure there is more UGC there's certainly more UGC than like what we see in our brands, and it's such a feel good thing, right? Like when you find something that like makes because I look at Uber, like some people do it and like that's how they put food on the table. Like it's a very personal, intimate thing, and that's where I'm like I don't always think about it that way. I think about the same thing with LinkedIn and their marketing team. That their whole like ethos is that like, hey, we want to help people find jobs, right? Because that's their livelihood. And from being in healthcare for so long, you think about like your own personal health as being very intimate, and it is. And I don't think there's anything more intimate. It's not exclusive, right? You can have that same kind of, emotional feeling and sentiment in any brand, and that's what I've learned so much through the three of you and so many others who do this. And I think that's such a I think about the UGC piece too, and I don't see it as much, but when I do, our teams, I mean, I send it to 150 plus marketers in our company, even if they're not on the brand, and it's feel good, and it reminds people why we kind of show up to work and do what we do, because we didn't put any money behind that, right? Someone's a fan of Chapstick or Emergency or whatever brand because it works for them, or it's because their parents used it or they grew up with it, right? For whatever sentimental reason. So it's so interesting kind of hearing it through you guys, and I would imagine you have a pretty repetitive like model to be able to do that, week to week, right, Troy?
Yeah, our community managers definitely work really closely with the dashboards and queries we've built to be able to pull in mentions of Uber and Uber Eats since we're on both brands, but also just general industry and category conversations. I think it's just, as you all know, there's so much out there on the internet, and trying to hone in on the specific stuff is more helpful when there is so much data and post mentions that aren't going to be relevant. But when you kind of do find that one great post out of, 1,000 mentions and we're able to use it in a positive way, it's the best feeling.
There's another overlap that's happening when it's like brands that are consumer facing come out of the social media bubble and like are in real life. Ellen, I loved like your take on that sort of thing. Maybe you can share with the audiences around like activations or like exposure that you've had to that cross-departmental work from social listening into the other kind of business units. Just from your experience, what could you share?
Yeah, no problem. So I think that's the kind of go back to also what Danny and Jory say earlier. Not only you see the creative side of social, right? And kind of go back to you, Tan, that what you were saying, that the daily life, we see also Gen Z behavior, we're seeing on TikTok and how that tie back to your social media life. But when you see it was also a lot of product driven. I think that is the best part. And then also you look at customer feedback, you look at product, you also look at industry, and then you also look at creativity on social, and you tie all that, and then to kind of explore the possibility and the business opportunity in terms of events, in terms of activation. And then you also understanding that what will fit like in your audience and what will resonate not only the people like online, but your user, which is probably not following you on social, but offline as well. So we're using social listening to kind of look at multi-dynamic data, and then we create a more like holistic story. So I think that a lot of people tend to forget that, oh, social listening is just social. It's just about content. No, it's about your product. It's about your also operation from the customer feedback perspective. It goes from legal, it goes from many, many things.
Thanks for that, Ellen. I think that's a really it's always cross-departmental, right? And I think that's a really powerful thing because in the end of the day, we need to break down silos, right? Like there's we from especially from an operationalizing perspective. So, Chris, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we are makers of films and TV shows, streaming shows, games, and so on and so forth. And we are quite frankly, we're kind of a behemoth. And a great example is Barbie. When we are promoting Barbie, it's not just It's not just our theatrical team promoting Barbie. It's TLC is promoting Barbie across their shows by having Pink there and having different things there. We have HGTV having an entire show about building Barbie's dream house. We literally bought out all the pink in the world. Like there was no pink paint left in the world. And so like there was just everything there, everything that had to do with any major promotions, Shark Week, Puppy Bowl, all those things are. We make sure that every single department is aligned in what our messaging is, and want to make sure that that cross departmentally we understand how are people reacting to those our activations and to the general movement in totality. Barbie was going to just be a movie, but it became a giant movement. Barbie core became a thing, and that part of it really came from the idea that we activated across every single brand, whether or not you are 100% related to the film or not. You are going to see Barbie somewhere, so that ideally it leads you back to the idea of, I need to watch that film. I want to be part of this overall movement. And so for us, social really kind of ties it all together to make sure that everybody uses it as a first step to engage and to get feedback, so that we can tweak the engagement so that we continue to drive interest.
I totally agree with Chris. And then I really want to give you guys kudos on you guys like cross the OR activation. And also, I think that is definitely a movement. And I remember like back in the days, like entertainment industry will use like viral marketing as like the entire franchise like kickoff. I feel like Barbie is the movie bring that all back. And then we saw seeing a lot of pink, right, Chris, like to your
Yeah.
point. And then even with Mean Girls this year, like they did it so many things, but you can tell it's because followed by Barbie's movement, they start partnering with like Uber, you know, Jory's company, that they say, oh, do you want to partner with your friends to watch, you know, Mean Girls with us? You get 20% off. Like those are the daily things that I see so much like through social listening that they start coming back. So it is amazing. Definitely movement for sure.
I'm just going to talk about an elephant in the room here. Was there an earthquake just now?
Yeah, we had
I
it.
Guys, I
Doing-
swear to God, I ran. I thought my stairs, like I could feel them with the like. I don't know if you guys felt the room shake.
Yeah.
Like my whole neighborhood just. I thought it. I swear to God, I thought my like stove blew up or something.
I saw it in your screen first, Danny, and then
Yeah,
I
everything
saw it
was-
10
Oh, really?
seconds later.
That is
That's
wild.
what we were saying. I was talking to my neighbors outside, and they were like, because we all have Ring cameras, and we're like, you know, I bet if we go back and look at this, and like, I haven't been that scared in a very, very long time.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Anyway, sorry.
go check your BPM there, Danny, on your smartwatch.
Yeah.
Hope everybody's safe, you know, before we make any jokes and stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone's safe, everybody's okay.
My
Chat,
mirror-
drop in the chat if you felt the earthquake, guys. Live on the state
There's
of
going to be a lot of
listening.
social listening around the earthquake in New
Yeah.
York.
Oh
That
my
is so
God.
good.
I'm like, I can't even get a word out. The adrenaline's pumping.
Hashtag earthquake, guys. All right.
Okay.
Well, look, I
All right,
mean,
listening.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm trying to figure out like what, because there's a few different like interesting questions that we've prepared and crowdsourced and things like that. And maybe it makes sense to talk a little bit about just sort of like, it's another evergreen concept, is like buy-in from leadership. You know, there's this like disconnect that we see a lot, especially because social intelligence is, generally speaking, a newer sort of, it's a newer space, okay, compared to advertising, even public relations, and so on and so forth. There seems to be difficulties and challenges in getting into that C-suite, getting recognized by executive leadership, getting buy-in from leadership to extend your role, to grow your team, to increase investment. Maybe we could just kind of like add that out onto the field here and see what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, I can jump in. Oh, so I think that, yeah, as you mentioned, it is a much newer form of research and intelligence than other very, you know, survey data or things like that. I think that for us, what we really try to prove is both like the proactive and reactive benefits of social intelligence. Obviously, with a lot of our crisis data, as we mentioned at the beginning of the panel, we try to kind of measure against past crises and be able to plan for future crises. But I also think there's a lot of proactive research that can be done with social intelligence. And I think what's exciting for me in my role is that we get to use social intelligence across a bunch of different departments. So, you know, working closely with product managers, marketing campaigns, comms releases, understanding different policy changes. So the more I think that social intelligence is within different facets of the company, it can really prove its value. That being said, I know we've spoken with different members of this panel and other people in the community. A lot of times social intelligence teams are very lean. So it can be hard to really prove that value when you might even just be a team of one. But I think during, you know, really important company moments, milestones, just providing that data to show the volume of conversation online is just such a growing opportunity within, you know, our space, and it's not going anywhere. You know, there continues to be new platforms of social media while the older traditional ones continue to change and evolve as well, but social intelligence data is not going anywhere. So really proving the value through different departments to me is what I'm working to do within Uber. And I think that it's being responded to really positively, and I'm excited about where it's going to go.
Yeah, can echo the same thing. And you know, I think it's very rewarding. I think more than anything, right? It's like it says, like this George said, so many of us are small, scrappy teams, and I think in the next 10 years that's going to change. There's going to be more. There's probably going to be 10 times as many people right in that time that are doing this, because the demand is there, the skill set will be there, and the business value will be there. And that's very much kind of the path that's being paved today, by so many people that are in these companies. And even just since from when I joined, there's so many companies that have doubled down on what this is. And our peers at some of the kind of larger tech companies and CPGs, they've got big teams too, right? I'm like, so there is progress, right? And like that's one of the things like I've struggled with too, is like I feel like we've become very comfortable with one person doing the work of 5 or 6 people. And that's the reality today, right? It's like the tech is so good and the people in it are very good, right? Is that like, and you're able to produce a high degree of output at relatively low cost, right? Getting access to this data looked a lot different in 2015 than it does today. And, assuming you have sound methods and techniques, which I know everyone on this panel does, right? You're able to produce valuable insight, actionable stuff, right? That changes the Uber experience, right? That's whatever new movie that, Chris is going to star in at Warner Brothers. And and Ellen, and same thing, right? Through the product lens, offering a better kind of, whether it's commerce, whether it's payments, whether it's community. I feel like there's so many things that the Cash App does, and for us too, right? It's the next right. We have our latest innovation is Sensodyne Clinical White, right? Which is pretty much like our next best or our second kind of, or maybe third attempt at kind of the whitening market, which is something we've struggled in historically. You wouldn't think, being the #1 leading brand in sensitivity, but it has been. So some great science and marketing and VBL and influencer and some stuff that we're doing behind it. But it all, back to Jory's point, right, is that it's all built on great kind of cross-functional teamwork, and that's something you have to build up over time. Like it becomes with being an evangelist. And between that and the efficiency piece, right, which is the cost, the ROI, stuff that finance really cares about. And is that it's very tangible, it's concrete, it's proven, and it's led by the many amazing social listeners that are in this profession today. So that's what inspires me. I think that's what excites me for the future. And another point Jory mentioned is about kind of like emerging media, which is like we measure certain things today, right? TikTok's new, Reddit is a little more mainstream than it used to be. Pinterest is still very, very relevant, but one of the most, I think, overlooked, underappreciated sources there is. It's not as big a deal for us, but as an app and as a social kind of media, it is. And so I spent a lot of time thinking with like my media counterparts who, want to show up, in various ad units, right? But it's like when we see other brands do stuff with Fortnite and Roblox and Decentraland, right? And like all these kind of different emerging technologies, they're not fit for advertisers. But I remember the day I said that about Reddit. I was at the company, and I was like, oh, it's not very advertiser friendly. And now it is, until that day will come. And all it takes is for Fortnite and Twitch and all these companies to hear like, hey, right, consumers come here, they interact with creators, or they're interacting with each other. And that's again where I kind of agree with Jory's final point, is like social intelligence isn't going anywhere. It's just going to change shape and form. The skills aren't going anywhere. The behaviors aren't changing, at least not the kind of micro kind of behaviors. Right? People are always going to, search for things and interact and laugh and like things, and right. I mean, like that's foundational now at this point. And I could be completely wrong in 10 years. That could completely change. That'll be fun to look back on. But I'm very, very confident. And again, reiterating all the points Jory made, is that kind of being cross-functional helps, right? Being evangelist helps, and keeping up to date on emerging media is key, because that's what's going to be the difference. Like I want to get there before Kenvue and Sanofi and P&G and all those other companies do, because I'm just a little competitive when it comes to social listening. But yeah, no, all great points. Chris, you gotta let us know what movie you star in next. Whatever's in the pipe.
Keep an eye out. But no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's the same thing when it comes to making sure that you are evangelizing and making sure that teams are aware of just the power of understanding what's going on in social and what are those opportunities to not just engage in our current content, but also as a library, we have so much, and for people to keep us top of mind in order to to grow those brands that we have latent. And by brands, it means a lot of different things, right? We can be a title as a brand, an actor as a brand, a franchise as a brand, just our overall brand as a brand, right? So even Fortnite, like we are advertising in Fortnite, right? So we noticed the trend, at least for a while, when there was concerts happening in Fortnite, and we're like, okay, well, this is a thing. Let's see how do we take advantage of that. And we brought the idea of a drive-in theater into Fortnite, right? We screened Nolan films in Fortnite. The whole idea of being relevant to the audiences so that they have the potential of wanting to check out other things coming out of our company. That's, we want to make sure that we're there. And I think leadership really appreciates the idea that, like, we are integrated into the here and now, and that's really why we get that buy-in.
One thing that's coming through for me is like audiences and kind of honing in on that profile, that segmentation, that like where your targets are, and there's probably different personas and things like that. Tactically speaking, I have a question around sort of auditing a social following to ensure that that ICP is there, kind of a social hygiene almost, follower hygiene, audience hygiene. Ellen, how do you tackle something like that?
Yeah, so usually how we look at is, first of all, you can look at your followers and then you measure against your content visibility, right? From an organic perspective, obviously, that we know there's a lot of bots there. And also giving that within the fintech industry, there are definitely a lot of bots there. And then so a lot of people that also just click farm. And I think the most important is you look at first your analytics, right? You first look at your content visibility and reach, and also engagement rate on reach, impressions on reach. We can go even dive in a little bit deeper. And I think the other way you can kind of layer it down is there are ways that you can analyzing your social media followers, that using silver listening tools out there. And then you kind of look at that persona and then you say, are these the people that really is also over indexed and also kind of where our users are? And that's which is you have to work with your internal research team, right? To say our followers also our users. And sometimes they're not. I will be very, very much telling you that. Sometimes you'll feel, well, that's a big gap. But which is also a good thing, a good opportunity, right? You say, this is the people I want to, go expand it to. But I think sometimes by doing that, you can immediately identify how much percentage of that are bots, and then how do you clean out the hygiene, basically, distribute more, how do I say, more evergreen engageable content, and then not soliciting, and then really honing on your content strategy with your organic team, and also want to refining your paid social strategy as well, because sometimes I don't know if you guys, sometimes I think I heard it from Danny and Chris and Jory before, is that sometimes pay social can also another reason why there are a lot of bots coming in as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I wish I had a better take on the following piece of audience, just because I think like we don't have as big a following as your brands and your handles, and but from an audience perspective, I think the whole hygiene piece, I look at it through the lens of just like, as brands who pretty much market to everyone, right? Who are the people we really should be marketing to? And this is one of the most difficult parts of my job and some of it is because there's limited like demographic and psychographic data, right? Like when you go look at someone online, they're not going to tell you their whole life story and their social security number, right? That would be nice, because then you could piece together their entire life and you would really know who they are. So I want to say like 3 years ago, I changed like the whole like strategy and like comms for like my team, and was like, hey, we want to get to know like the people better, right? It's less about branded listening, which we do very well and we'll always do. But like, how do we learn more about the people, right? That's kind of like the digital ethnography and like some of the other like more qualitative things we do. And I'm like, oh, well, this is more telling. But the really challenging piece is that like, anytime I run any type of analysis or like kind of tribe or community based analysis, it's like, oh, well, I mean, everyone here comes from different backgrounds and has different interests, and everyone seems to like Advil, right? or whatever other brand, and everyone gets headaches all the same, right? Or whatever other condition is we happen to be talking about, right? Whether it's Tums or Gas X, Nexium, so like it's a lot of the same things. And like, that's what's so difficult for me, because the brand teams are all like, oh, well, Danny, like find us the new next big thing. I'm like, I'm trying, like, it's hard. It's really, really hard. And some of it is, I don't know if it's twofold. I kind of lack the experience to do it, the time, the resources, the tools. It's like some of this is like, we know what to do. We don't have the money to do it, which is fine because we're still a pretty well-oiled machine. But like that kills me. I'm like, because that's what ladders into the larger media mix, right? Into the paid social efforts. Right? It's like when we did this with Voltaren, which is our topical. And when we brought it RX OTC Switch, this was a brand that we sold globally, but never in the US. It was prescription only. So now you can buy it at CVS and Target and Amazon.com, wherever. And part of what we did is your traditional kind of deep dive. I think you guys were talking about Reddit in the chat. Reddit was a huge source of information for Voltaren. And Voltaren's one of our few brands where Reddit conversation outweighs Twitter conversation. I think speaks a lot when you compare a private forum to a microblog, where there's just higher velocity on Twitter, right? More people tweet, and it's different. And I remember one of the audiences we found there was this like mountain biking, like mountain climbing. Like there was like this outdoorsy group, but like outdoor activities, like as a sport, like there's just so many different things that encompass that. Kayaking, I happen to like kayaking, so like I could relate to that. And I'm like, oh, like we don't traditionally market to these people. None of our marketing has ever reflected any of this. And so that was an easy insight to put forward for Voltaren, because they were using it too, right? One of the most extreme like outdoor sports and rock climbing and like free climb, or forget what exactly it was. I'm like, they're using our product along with this other jargon and stuff. So like it was really difficult. To kind of figure out like how do we market to these people? This is clearly an audience we haven't tapped, and they use us. And then in the same exact data set, it's like we're looking at communities. I think it was like our knitting or our crocheting, and it was the same thing. It was the same finding. I'm like, these are people who get joy out of sitting on the on their love seat on their sofas and knitting, and like that's a very realistic pain point and consumer need too. Is that people that got joy, and this was part of the whole marketing, was like the joy of movement, was that like people take and they get a lot of joy from just being able to do basic everyday things, that we take for granted as many of us who don't suffer from arthritis. And that's everything from doing a load of laundry to walking to the end of the and your driveway to get the mail, right? To picking up your kids at school, right? There were so many like very, very personal things that like we uncovered, and we took that, right? And like we turned that into some of our social ads, and they performed better on average than our previous copy and creative. And like that was like very, very clear to us. And that's when the team was like, oh my gosh, why don't we do more social listening? That report was pretty tough. It took me a long time, and I was like, guys, I can only do this. Like it takes me a month to do it to get this level of insight. And we've gotten better. That was years ago. So now we're a little bit better. But that's like my challenge too, is like someone had, I found out organically, but sometimes I'm like, I need some direction. I'm across 30 different brands. Everyone kind of wants the same thing. And so you learn to kind of manage expectations and processes, but at its core, you're still doing the same type of work. So all to tie this back to audience is that like we're not necessarily interested in like what our followers are. I wish we could. We just don't have the right toolkit. And it's more important to look kind of outward, right? It's through your traditional earned media, right? UGC, social listening. So that's where we've had a lot of success, and that's what I look at through the lens of like, social cleansing, right? It's like, how do we get 100% sure or close to it at least on who we want to market to, who we want to go after. And it's really, really, really tough. It's something that I still struggle with, but hopefully insightful for today's listeners.
So this is related to, I think, what Shweta in the chat was talking about, like making decisions, like is social good enough to make decisions versus traditional market research. And I don't see us as being competitive, actually, we aren't competing against each other, is what I mean. We actually should be partnering. So like, Danny, what you were saying about like, you don't know who to target. The thing is, at least for us, what we've done, especially in the theatrical side, is for every title that we are releasing, we do a comprehensive study way, way early, and we identify who our target audiences are. Here's our core audiences, here are our reach audiences, and this is all based on a series of segmentations and all these other things. And we have like data, so much data backed up about who these types of audiences are. And what we do on our end is actually we look at these potential audiences, and we're looking to see, okay, so these female ice fishers in Minnesota, that's not really an audience, obviously, but let's say that is, we can find people who are on social media talking about ice fishing, who happen to be female, who happen to be in that region. Maybe not, we can't, maybe narrowing down Minnesota is too restrictive, but in the ice fishing regions of US, we can say, hey, these people, are they engaging with our content? And if not, what else are they engaging with? We can see, okay, well, they've already posted in the past about ice fishing. What else are they talking about? And is there things that are relevant to them that we can slide into their DMs in a way, right? So for us, it's really important to partner with with research and say, what are you finding, and how can we use your findings so that we can keep a consistent pulse on these audiences, so that we can monitor what they're doing and like make sure that we are hitting our targets. Because end of the day, like, companies spend so much money on segmentations, we might as well take advantage of that and use it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point, Chris. And like, where I agree with everything you said, by the way, and put it in chat. But it's almost, it's an opportunity cost too, right? It's like, yeah, it's going to cost us, I don't know, 600,000, 700,000, whatever it costs us to do our studies with Kantar and Ipsos, and we still can't replicate that. Like, we're still gonna pay them.
Yeah.
But part of it is like, well, what if you gave $100,000 to us, right, and we give it to a specialized social listening agency, right, or someone who like can actually, brings a new way of thinking, new methodology, right? Like, that's actually what I think our company's done really well, is leaning into like smaller niche providers, because P&G is doing it, right, and Reckitt's doing it, right, and all the other companies. And like, traditionally, our companies just didn't work that way, and that was so hard for me to understand when I got here. It's like, why don't we work with? You don't have to work with a big, because it doesn't always necessarily equal the best output. But what you were saying is like, yeah, look, why don't we take 100,000 of these dollars, transform it into something else, right? And you get insight that you wouldn't have gotten, or if you affirm an insight you have, it's the same thing, but it's a fraction of the cost. And I'm like, and that's just like, I think that's well understood between like our consumer insights team. we're on the same team, but there's like 25 of them and there's one of me. So it's like, yeah, we spend a lot of money to run these studies, but a lot of that is the kind of directional stuff that I need, right? Different from like the marketers and like the feedback and the insight and the questions I get from them. But it's more about like, in the pain category for all our brands, right? It's all about invisible pain, right? And letting your body tell you to know when to rest and recover and not have to force yourself to take medicine, right? There's all these kind of different things, but a lot of that's rooted in your traditional kind of primary qual and quant, So like and people don't see that, but that's where I also have to kind of be the evangelist and be the guy that says, hey guys, we're piecing this together because it makes sense. And you know what? I wouldn't have found the insights that we had for, rest and recover in my data had I not worked with them. So like, and that wasn't very obvious. And I didn't do a very good job of communicating and like teaching other people that's kind of the way of working. Because I didn't really know, because I had to figure out the way of working. I think you guys can all relate to this too, but like I think about it every day in opportunity cost. I'm like, all you gotta do is give me $1 million and I'll turn that to gold, because I turned, $50,000 into gold. It didn't happen by accident. It happened with hard work and years of figuring it out. And so that's proven. That's business value. That's how you're supposed to get buy-in. I'm not getting it in certain areas for some other reasons that I won't get into, but generally speaking, that's how we've been able to make a clear step change every year, both in analytics, insights delivery, speed to insight. So really good point, Chris. That got me brain dumping a few things in my head. So really, really good points.
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that Chris and Danny have said. I think for us, audience segmentation and research has been a challenge, as Chris and Danny mentioned, because of, the kind of reliance and patterns of just being used to getting, sorry, there's a motorcycle going by in New York City. But
At least it's not an earthquake.
yeah, at least it's not an earthquake. Within the internal, getting used to getting a quant research such as survey data, we're never going to be able to say this was 50% male, 50% female, broken down in this conversation. This was the age ranges. Here's like where they live and where they work. It's just never going to happen. But I think that what we can do, as Danny and Chris said, is really enforce understanding more of the qual behaviors, interests that people are really tuned into on social. Especially, I know we've been talking about in the chat, Reddit, people are much more honest there because it is mainly anonymous. So, if someone says on Reddit, I'm an Uber driver, you're going to believe that they probably are an Uber driver. They're not going to be lying about that. And since they're anonymous, they'll really give that honest feedback that can really help us in turn take those insights and make real, changes to products as needed versus, maybe in survey or other types of research data, they might not be as honest or transparent. So I still think, even though it's very different than past audience segmentation and research, that it's still incredibly valuable, but it can be a little bit more difficult to find it and dive into.
I also want to kind of echo all three of you, and then definitely I think the pinpoint, the challenge we all share on daily basis. And I think it's a great opportunity and then for listening to tap into research, and vice versa, is what kind of signal we can also give it to research when we saw certain trends, because I do see that sometimes. And then so later it becomes a collaboration that how is listening data can also, I don't want to say be part of the quant, but basically we all tie the data back together, like Danny, what you were saying. And then like, when the time goes on, that we can also look at other party data like SEO and other things, that we not just rely on research, we rely on listening, we rely on multiple web analytics, Adobe and other things to tell a more holistic insights. And I think that's where my journey with the research team is getting a little bit better and better, is because sometimes we'll have a different results too. They will have a hypothesis which is turned this way, but listening is actually the result actually the other way. But I think it's a POV that when you have a counterpoint, that's not a bad thing sometimes. That's actually maybe it's another opportunity to say, hey, your survey is saying this way, but social is turned out the other way. Maybe we should dive into this a little bit more. So I feel like that journey definitely is very challenging for sure, but I also find it more better and better over the years, that I feel like research definitely now, at least that with the people I work with, they definitely have more like, oh, we should probably tune into listening to see what kind of signal they're getting, especially when it's come to public perception. I feel like for brand perception, brand awareness, and brand consideration, because social is such a huge platform for user and audience, and then they starting to tune into us a lot.
How would you? I have a question for the three of you, just on the point you made, Ellen, right? Which is kind of like hinting towards healthy debate. Speaking from experience, where like, we had an innovation that wasn't doing very well, and we were getting trashed in our ratings and reviews, and so that's part of kind of my job and same type of tech stack. And I remember I ran the insights on it. Like everyone, it's like very clear, like people just don't like the taste and it's terrible. And I'm like, well, we're already looking at reformulating it. And like there were steps that are already taken. And I was like, well, people mix this stuff, right? And so like I'm trying to piece together a few different findings I had. And my recommendation was, why don't we make a flavorless version, since people are going to mix it anyway. Don't give them a reason. Don't give them any flavor to hate or love, because clearly no one loves it. And they rejected that. They were like, yeah, no, it didn't do well in like pre-concept testing. And it's so funny because I'm going to end up being right. But and like it's one of those things. I'm like, my stuff gets shot down all the time. My stuff gets accepted a lot, but there's like Ellen, going back to your point, I'm like, there's healthy room for debate. I also didn't debate it too hard. I was like, this is what I got. This is your full deep dive. I mean, I did a ton of work in a short amount of time to try to save this innovation. I couldn't have saved it alone. The 40 of us couldn't have saved it. And something like that's the reality of innovation and the work that we do with R&D and supply and some of the other kind of cross functions, is that like some innovations fail, right? I mean, like Thomas Edison didn't figure out the light bulb on his first try, right? And so like I'm like constantly reminding myself of that. But that was one of those like ones I feel like that's gonna sting me for a while, because I'm like, yeah, like I worked really hard. I'm like, I think this is right, and like I love working with the innovation team. But they're like, yeah, this is very helpful, but we're not going to do this. I'm like, all right, so reformulate it, try it again, and this thing probably won't succeed anyway because there's been too much harm done already. So, but that's part of like Ellen. I think the point, like, we don't have enough healthy debate. Like when like my insight conflicts with, and I kind of hear it too. I'm like, the scientists in our labs that are testing all this stuff, I probably trust them more too. But it's kind of an interesting thing, right? Like, where do we become more assertive? Right? Where do we add more credibility? And I don't think we lose credibility by being wrong or being shot down. So that's like one of those things I feel like I had to learn just by doing. It's it's not written in a textbook anywhere. But going back to like your point is like, at what point does it make sense to talk about things or flesh it out or debate it? So I'd love to hear any stories you guys have on where you guys have been met with healthy debate, if at all.
Dun dun dun. Well, we're at time. Everybody.
Wasn't even watching. Well, if it wasn't for the earthquake.
Yeah. But look, I mean, a great signal to me of like if this chat or this like event was valuable is like the amount of attendees that are here, engagement in the chats has been popping off. People are staying right down to the last seconds here. So I want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you. Express some gratitude, not only to the amazing captains of industry, Chris, Ellen, Jory, Danny, but also to all of you who joined us today for episode 2, part 2 of the State of Social Listening 2024. Lots more cool stuff coming in 2024. Keep an eye out. Be part of the conversation. And reach out to me as well, guys, if you like this chat and you want to see more, you want to be part of it or something like that. Folks, I'll give you guys the last word if you want to say something real fast, but we can end it there.
No, I think just thank you, Tan, for bringing us together. This was awesome. And looking forward to more events like this in the future.
Let's go, team.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great one. Have a great weekend, guys. Great job.
Thanks, everyone.
Talk to you later.
Bye, everyone.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye.